Ladies and gentlemen, Hebrews and Shebrews, welcome to the Life Podcast. Today we're talking to Heidi of the Rain Country Homestead, and her specialty is herbal remedies, but she also talks all about homesteading, making your own clothing, and removing yourself from big pharma. And we're going to talk about all of that, and also about her personal testimony of being saved, and also of coming into the Torah. I'm still talking about the Truth Reformation 2.0 audiobook. I recorded it myself, so it's 7 hours of me talking about apologetics for the Torah observant movement. And that means that I'm going to go through all of the question verses in Galatians, Ephesians, John, Mark, Revelation, the whole 9 yards, and give the perspective of the Torah, which is basically to have a doctrine sans contradiction. And I claim in the book, and I claim right now, that cannot be done if the Torah is not relevant to the lives of Christians today. And that's what the book is all about. If you're interested in it, check out the link and get it. So without further ado, I give you Heidi. Heidi, welcome to the Life Podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
I am just so delighted, Luke. A couple of years ago, I would have never thought I'd be here, but here I am.
I'm glad you're here. And I guess I'd like to start off with the fact that in your videos, you start off with God is good. And can you tell us how you figure that out in your life? How did you meet him? What's your testimony? This is the idea.
Well, I've been a believer all my life. I was basically born and raised in church. My father, he married my mom when I was 4, and he adopted me at that age, and he was a Baptist minister. And so that's kind of what I grew up in. And I went to Bible college for a little bit. We kind of went, we were Baptist, we went to the Assembly of God, and then, we've been in many different types of churches. And I mean, it's really kind of a long story. And if you watch that one video I had, I covered some of this, but what it really comes down to is, after Patrick and I met and we got married and we started going to the Nazarene church, we were there for 15 years. We served in different ways on the board. Mostly with me, I was on worship teams, playing guitar, singing, and playing drums. And in all of these churches to some degree. And the last church that I was in was the Assembly of God. And it was about that time that, let's see, it was 2010. And I decided with an election coming up, it was time for me to stop just voting for the lesser of two evils and start learning some things. Boy, I tell you what, that's quite the rabbit hole to get into. Oh, it led me in so many different directions. But then when it came back to, because then you start realizing I've been lied to here, I've been lied to here, I've been lied to here. Is church lying to me? And not that I think that pastors and the people intentionally try to lie to people. We've all been sold a bag of goods somewhere along the way, or had a bag of goods taken from us, you might want to say. And the interesting thing is that, so around 2012, we decided, that was when I really started researching the holidays and trying to decide, does this belong in the Christian's life? And I mean, just started seeing things that didn't make sense. And we decided, we did some research. We decided, okay, let's do away with Christmas and Easter. And we definitely had already given up Halloween when my kids were little, because I was questioning then. And here's, I'm backtracking, but my kids were 3 and 6. And it was coming around to being about that time of the year again. And I thought, even though I grew up doing the Halloween thing, something just, again, it was one of those moments where, are we supposed to be doing this? So I pulled out, it had old encyclopedias on hand, these old encyclopedias. I'm like, let's just, we have internet. It was 90 something, I don't remember. But so I pull out the encyclopedia where it talks about Halloween, and it's just a little blip like that long. And I read it out loud to my boys. talking an encyclopedia. We're not talking a deep dive. That was enough for my oldest son to say, if that's what Halloween's about, we shouldn't be celebrating it. I'm like, okay. I shut the book and I said, that's it. We're done with that. It just took several years for me to kind of look at the other holidays. So the interesting thing about this, Luke, is that in 2012, when we decided to do all that, I remember I'm standing at the Assembly of God Church. I think church is getting ready to start. We were just done. I'm gathering up my bass guitar and I'm talking to a lady there. We were just chatting, kind of talking about Christmas a little bit. And I kind of shared a little bit of my thoughts. And I said, aren't there these like days in the Bible that we're told to celebrate and honor? And she says, yeah, we were thinking about looking into that. And I was like, yeah, okay, cool. Well, right about the same time, I found some pastors online that were more conspiracy theory minded. They actually spoke out against the 501c3 churches and, all the stuff I'd been learning about. I'm like, cool, there's pastors actually talking about this stuff. So I started following them. And then was when I started learning there was actually people heading the same direction. Then it was kind of, a lot of people were calling it Hebrew roots, but we know there's so many different titles out there. And of course, listening to them, I was like, okay, that's wrong. We're not supposed to go that way. And then they shared some things like, how we all have that crazy uncle? They want to share the crazy uncle stories, about people within the movement. And so, oh gosh, I don't want to be a part of that. And so I really shied away from it for the next 12 years, or I should say more like 10 years.
This episode of the Life Podcast is brought to you by The Way documentary, The Truth, Reformation 2.0 Apologetics book, and Truth Tracks. The Way documentary tells the story of our movement. This is the story of people who were trading Easter ham for Passover lamb and Sunday church for Saturday Sabbath, all in an effort to live like their Savior. It dives into their stories through their own voices and into the history and theology that show how the church got to where it is today. The Truth, Reformation 2.0 is the only book of its kind, an all-encompassing theological treatise that answers every question a mainstream Christian might have about why you want to keep Torah. And finally, Truth Tracks are small comics, beautifully illustrated, that use stories and scripture to remind Christians that once we are saved by grace through faith, we are called to live and do the instructions of Yah, his Torah. If you want to learn more about any of these products, go to thewaydoc.com. That's theway, D-O-C, like documentary.com.
And that was around 2010, you're saying, when you...
So 2012 was when we gave up the holidays and, and then I started thinking there's something more here. It's like Christy Jordan was saying, I know there's something more. And that's what I was feeling. And I thought, okay, well, I found these pastors and they're great pastors. I still have a high amount of respect for them. So I would never speak ill of them. And, despite their stance on this, on Torah keeping, I learned a lot from them. I grew so much more in my faith. I became more interested in my Bible and what it had to say, what God had to say to us, but still didn't do the deep dive into what the Old Testament said from Genesis all the way through. And that's the mistake most of us make. We depend on people to interpret all this stuff for us. And it's always a little bit here and a little bit over here. And let's just kind of cram these two verses that don't go together. And so a couple years ago, well, it's probably been about 3 years now, there's a couple that moved here with their family, and they bought a homestead just outside of town. And long story short, we ended up getting to know them and found out we had a lot in common. And that was just before they were starting down this same road. And then I found out they were kind of sharing a little bit of this with us. And I'm like, oh, you guys are going that way. You better be careful. You better be careful. Could be another gospel. And, but here was the difference. was as they were growing in their faith and as they were learning and they were sharing with us, because we would get together with them at least twice a month, and we still do every Saturday, and really started seeing changes, really started feeling that maybe I need to look into this more. But then there's that fear. I don't want to be deceived again. And so somewhere when I first started my channel, which was in 2016, by this point, I had actually given up unclean meats for a time. And it was kind of working on trying to make Saturday a Sabbath, because I still believed, because no matter who I went to, nobody could give me a solid answer. Are we supposed to be keeping Sabbath or not? You'd hear a lot of roundabout stuff that never really made sense. So I'm like, maybe I should at least be trying. And I didn't try hard enough, I'll admit that. And then I'm like, okay, listen to these pastors a little bit longer, and they're saying, oh, okay, no, this stuff isn't for us for today. This was just for the Jews back then. So then fast forward a little bit again, and here we are. I'm sitting in my friend's living room, and Patrick's out talking with Jared. My friends, by the way, our friends are Jared and Annie. She sometimes goes by Carol, which she has an Instagram called Sometimes Carol because of that. But she also has an Instagram and a Facebook called Dove's Landing, where she shares her homesteading stuff. And so anyway, we're sitting there talking, and she goes, I don't remember what we're talking about. But then she goes, you do know the Jews are just represent the tribe of Judah. Huh? Wait, hold the phone. I was just like, no, what? And I can't be the only one that thought this. Is it just me? Am I just that dumb? I didn't really listen. And so I started asking her some questions. I'm like, wait a minute. And then that definitely then started me down another rabbit hole. And so I thought, you know what? Years ago, I was listening to some of Zach's videos on his New to Torah channel. And there was a lot that I agree with, especially his view, what he was sharing about the holidays. But there was stuff I was just like, I don't know. And my fear of being deceived again just kept me pushing that away. I'm like, maybe I'll go back and listen to some of his videos again. So I started listening, and I was just like, wait, whoa, what? I'm like, this makes too much sense. How can this be right? But it makes sense. And so I was really getting nervous. And keep in mind, during this time, Patrick's father was still alive, and he lived down in California. So Patrick would drive down there, spend a week, help him out with some different things, and then come back home. And so there was this week-long period where he was gone. And I thought, this is the time I need to really look into this stuff. And then I started getting more and more scared, because not only was I realizing it made way too much sense, there was that fear again. I don't want to be deceived. And I didn't know what Patrick was going to think when he got home. I thought, he's going to think I totally lost my mind. Yet on the other hand, I'm like, but being that he's the more logical creature of this marriage, I think a lot of this will make sense to him. Because that's where I see this would appeal to men, because of the logical things. We have these guidelines that make sense. We fall into these guidelines instead of hearing this and then this and all this contradicting information. And I'm telling my friend Annie about this, and she goes, read Deuteronomy 28. I'm like, okay. So I'm doing some work in the kitchen. I go to Bible Gateway. I go to Deuteronomy 28, set it on play. And I'm listening, and I'm just like, wow. Okay, I'm going to listen to Deuteronomy 28 again. Wow. So I listened to it a third time. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to listen to the whole doggone book of Deuteronomy, because I think I need to hear the whole thing. And I tell you what, the Lord blessed me so much. And a couple of times as I'm listening, I just had to stop and throw my hands to heaven and say, thank you, Lord, for showing me this. Thank you for your truth. But then there was still that fear. There's still that fear. Am I being deceived? And I can't remember which one of those events happened first, because it was this week period of time where everything was just crammed together, so much going on at once. And I was getting ready for bed, and I'm standing there in my room, and I just start sobbing. I just start sobbing, and I say, Lord, I don't want to be wrong. I don't want to be deceived again. I've been warned about this for so many years, but I can't unsee what I've seen. And he says to me, or at least I believe he was saying to me, you just need to trust me. You just need to trust me and my word. Yeah, these guys have good messages. Yes, they love me. But you can't trust just what any man says. Not even Zach, not 119 Ministries, not whoever. Don't trust just them. Which I have to say, I appreciate that 119 Ministries always says, test everything. But then, I sobbed some more. I fell on my knees and I prayed and I said, okay, Lord, I'm going to keep trusting you. I'm going to keep moving through with this. So this was about a year ago that all this happened. Patrick comes home the day of the Feast of Trumpets. The same day, or the night before, it was the night before. The same day we were heading out to our friends. It was actually happened to fall on our regular Saturday get-togethers. We do one at their house, they come here, back and forth. And so I kind of sort of dropped the bomb a little bit. And then I told them, we're going to go out there and they're going to be doing the Feast of Trumpets. And I think it will be good. It'll be simple. It'll be simple. They're just going to blow their trumpet and, we'll eat dinner like we always do. And we'll talk and we'll pray. And the whole way out there, I'm sharing mostly because it takes about 15, 20 minutes to get to their house. So I'm sharing some stuff with him. And he's like, he was a little irritated. And when we got there, he's just like, but then when the four of us really got to talking and he really started listening, I could see the gears turning and I could see things click, click, click. And I'm like, by the time we left that night to head home, his attitude was completely different. And I knew it was just like I thought. Initial irritation, having to face up, like all of us. We had to face up to the fact that we weren't taught everything that we needed to be taught. And it's hard. It's hard when you realize that. And yet at the same time, it's exciting because you realize how much sense it makes. Then you start practicing these things and you start realizing how much freedom there is. People say, oh, you're bound by the law, or you're this, that, and the other thing. It's like, no, it's actually the other way around. And so by this point, I had become very serious about keeping the Sabbath. Like, I'm not talking about, going crazy, like, sitting in a cold house and no lights on or whatever, but just what Scripture says. Don't work, don't make anyone else work, and rest. And we started just making that a priority to take the day off. And I remember it was scary because it's like, with all the grandbabies and the YouTube videos and trying to keep up on my channel, which is a full-time job in itself, and keeping up on the garden and the housework and all the things that I do, I'm like, I don't know how it's going to happen. I don't know how it's going to work, but I have to be obedient. And the amazing thing, and I know everybody probably shares this same thing, was that how by doing that, it's like, wait a minute, how is it I have all this extra time? I'm now only working 6 days a week. I have all this extra time. I can just enjoy myself. I can listen to some more interviews on the live podcast or whatever it is. There's one more thing I got to share that I forgot to throw in here. You're gonna laugh because you laugh all the time anyway. But I love that anyway. So it was about 2 years ago that our friends, they gave us this DVD and they're like, would you guys be interested in watching this? it's just kind of where we're sort of heading. Thought you guys might be interested. So we took it home and we watched it. And I was like, oh, there's Zach. And I'm like, okay, there's a lot in this that makes sense. And this is before, so this is 2 years ago. So this is before a year ago when I really just had a complete change of heart. But I was just like, wait, no. Okay, I don't want to be deceived. I don't want to be deceived. And so I wasn't as receptive as I could have been. And so this last year, I go to their, we're at their house. I'm like, I want to borrow that DVD again because I think I'm going to hear things I didn't hear. And of course, you know which DVD it was. It was The Way. And here's Luke's smiling face. Hebrews and Shebrews. And I'm smiling and I'm listening and I'm like hearing what people are saying. I'm like, I didn't hear this last time. I didn't hear that last time. And suddenly, I mean, it was such an incredible blessing. So sometimes when we're sharing with people, not everyone's always ready at the same time. Not, and we have to, and this is one of the things I really appreciated about Christy's interview, is that we have to always approach it with understanding and love and not realizing that we're more, how did she word that? We're more set apart than anyone else. But if we can live it and we can show them the freedom and the happiness and not that obviously that things are perfect, not everything, obviously, but if they can see that in us, if we can live it out in front of them and then continue to be loving towards them, I think that's going to be the best way that we can reach people with this truth. And I don't know if you happen to notice, but you should have just got an order from somebody by the name of Heidi for the set of the DVD and the book. I'm sorry it took me so long to finally order it.
No, you didn't need,
but I'm like,
no problem. You didn't need to. It was, but I hope you like, the book and everything. And
well, I haven't read the book yet, but I've heard some really good things about it. But I wanted to make sure I had the DVD on hand so I can share that with my boys, with my sons, starting with my oldest. He's the one that's currently in church. He's back in church. He's playing drums on the worship team, same church that I was in before I left. And then my youngest one, he's not there at all. But either way, I'm hoping that they'll both take time to watch that. And then if they want, I'll share the book with them too. But, I'm sorry I keep backtracking, but I should have written notes so I'd remember some of these things. But just an interesting little sidebar. When I was listening to Deuteronomy 28, and it was going through the part about the curses, it was talking about how you're going to have this itchy rash that won't heal, and a sore botch on your foot and on your knee. And I'm like, it just so happened that I had this mystery rash all up and down my arms that had started months prior, and I had tried everything to get rid of it, all the natural things. I didn't know what it was. It was the weirdest thing. It started on my forearms and spread all the way up to my shoulders. Then I started getting it on the sides of my knees. And then I had a knee injury. So I had a sore knee because of that, because I was practicing some martial arts stuff with my son, doing something I'd done many times, breaking a board. Funny move, and down I went and tore an ACL. Oh. But so I had the knee. And then another mystery thing was my feet, especially the one foot, the heels of my feet were hurting so bad. Some days I could barely walk. I still don't know what was causing it. Now, do I think that God was cursing me because of that? No, I don't. I think he was allowing this to happen so that when I would hear those scriptures, it would make me go, well, that's interesting, and kind of, catch my attention. And it certainly did. And by the way, everything's better. I did manage to get rid of the rash. It still took a little time and a little work, and I did find some natural ways around it. But yeah, I still don't know what all it was, but I just think it's interesting how God uses these, the Father, It's like, here's a little wake-up call for you here. Oh, here's another one here. And it works.
Wow. Goodness gracious. Well, can we dive in, go back to or zoom in on this whole, what you mentioned multiple times about being deceived. And was that just like you felt like the church wasn't telling you, for example, Halloween wasn't good to celebrate? Or was it when you started learning about the Torah and you thought, oh no, this is wrong, and people are going down too many conspiracy theory paths, or both of those things?
It was both. It was it started off in these increments. And, like, I don't know if you've looked into the whole, 501c3, what's involved in being a 501c3 church. And when I learned about that, I was rather shocked. We think being a 501c3 corporation just means, that means you're you can't be
Nonprofit.
taxed, and yeah, charitable organization. There we go. That's the word I was looking for. You start learning about that, and you realize that, like, one of the pastors I was listening to during that time, he was given the paperwork to become a 501c3, and he goes, you know why I didn't? Because I read the paperwork. When you sign that paperwork, you become a creature of the state. And now the state has control over what you can say and teach and do. And most people don't know this. They have no idea. And so that was a wake-up call. And then I got to the point where I would sit in church and I would watch. I would listen. I would listen to what was being taught and then compare it to what scripture was saying. And there was a lot of good things. I'm not saying it was all wrong. It was all bad, but there was clear there were areas that we had little by little been straying away from what scripture said. And this has been going on for many, many years. It wasn't like one day the church just stopped doing all the good stuff, that they were supposed to do. It's all incremental. It's the boiling of the frog. And I even think about, because I went to an Assembly of God church when I was a teenager as well. So I've been kind of in and out of different churches through my whole life. And the Assembly of God church, the way it was when I was a teenager, was very different to what it was when I first came to Forks and started going to the Assembly of God church here. And then I've been there visiting, and there's still great, wonderful, godly people there. I'm not bad mouthing any of these people, but I see even more compromise than what there was before I left. And how does this happen? It happens as we start pushing away from what God says, what the Father says in his words, what he's clearly laid out, and that he didn't do away with. Because that's the other thing. You start reading these scriptures. You start going, because Patrick, when one of the things we decided after he came back and we were kind of talking through this thing, we went through a few different teachings, and Patrick says, let's just start reading the Bible together. We're going to start from Genesis and we're going to go all the way through. I said, I was thinking about doing that same exact thing. And do you realize that's the first time? And see, we've been married now for 34 years. And that was the first time last year at this time that we had ever read through the Bible together, or even just did Bible studies together, except for on occasion here and there, but on a regular basis every single night. And so we finished Revelation. I don't know how long ago it was now, but now we immediately turned around and started over again. And we're in Judges right now, about halfway through. And the second time through is even better. And I know the third time through is going to be even better. But every time you're looking at this stuff going, how did I not see this before? How did I not see this before? This is so clear. So, with that, and then I keep answering that question for myself, though. You know why. You know why you didn't see it before. Because you were taught to read this a certain way and not read it within the context of all of the scripture. The Sabbath was never done away with. It was never changed. The food laws were never changed. We've got modern day Bibles that are adding parenthetical statements that never were a part of Scripture. By saying this, Jesus did it, said all foods were clean. No, he didn't. He never said that. It's those things like that. And you're just, because I'm a King James Bible person, and my Bible didn't say that. So to me, since I was already into the King James Bible, to me, reading this stuff, I'm like, well, it says right here. It says right, why are we questioning this? It's really clear right here. And then you read like Peter's vision. It's so obvious when you read it within context. It's so obvious what it means. And yet that's just another excuse so we can have our bacon. So, yeah. And so I have love for these people, the church that are where I once was. And that's what we always have to remember, is we were there too. We are not better than anyone just because our eyes now have been open to Scripture. But we need to use what we've learned to try to encourage people to, I don't tell people, oh, go listen to this teaching or that teaching. I don't do that, because they're fallible men. A lot of them, they all have great teachings of some kind, but they're going to get something wrong. Why? Because they're human. And so what I tell people, if you want the truth, go to the only one that is truth. And he has a book. He has a book already. Mm-hmm. And it's very clear. So when you start from Genesis and you read all the way through, whatever you didn't get the first time, or, you can pray about it in there and say, Lord, please show me. What does this mean? I don't know. Because he did that with me a couple times. I was like, wait, I'm confused. I don't know what this means. It sounds like it's opposite. Heidi, just keep reading. Oh, okay. Oh, it's clear now. I was like, duh. So like Zach would say, you don't start a book. You don't, I'm going to use, because I got my Torah sisters. So we don't grab a book. I'm going to read this book. I'm going to start right in the middle. Well, good grief. I don't know what this means. No, that's not how you read a book. You start from the beginning, because then the New Testament, everything in the New Testament is based on the Old Testament. It's all one book. It all goes together. It has to go together, and you can't expect to understand it if you're only reading tiny snippets or keep going back to your favorite verses that you think mean something else than what they really mean, because you didn't read it in context. We've all been guilty of that, right?
Yeah, you're right. So you shared in your testimony videos that mean Torah people online actually put you off of even wanting to consider this for a while. So what changed in like last year or the last couple of years? Were you able to just do it? Like you just read the Bible yourself and saw, oh, well, they're right about some things, or
I do have to give some other people credit. I mean, the first thing is, I feel like part of what I had to endure from the hands, endure, that is such a strong word. Good grief. I'm not that much of a wimp. But some of the stuff I had to put up with, some of the rude comments and the, you're wrong, you're blah, blah, that's just a handful of people. But unfortunately, it's the noisy, squeaky, loud, obnoxious wheel that gets heard the most. And honestly, I kind of deserved it, because when I was first going 12 years ago about the holidays, I'm like, what's wrong with you people? Can't you see this is pagan? I made that same mistake too. And God had to humble me. And so I started realizing I'm just getting back what I've already dished out in the past. But yes, it did kind of put me off, because I'm like, all these people just think they're so much better than everyone else, and everybody's wrong, and everybody's going to hell because we're not doing things exactly like they do. Well, I was wrong in that too, because as I started paying attention to my followers and the comments, I realized there was a far more wonderful, loving, caring people that were already on this path. And you pick up on it, obviously. Shalom and Yah and thank Yeshua, and which at first that also put me off. That's why you don't hear me use those phrases a lot, for the same reason why Christy Jordan shared in her video. It's the same reason, because I don't I don't want to scare people away. I want them to hear the truth in the language they're familiar with. And that's important. And when you hear the name Jesus, and like I listened to a video one time where they had people all over the world saying the name of Jesus in their own tongue. And I'm like, this is beautiful. I mean, I got goosebumps. It was so beautiful. How can that not be beautiful? And though I do understand, I understand that we want to call Jesus by the name that he was given, Yeshua, that his mom called him. I get that. I don't want to be called some weird name, but at the same time, how many names do I have? My husband calls me Old Blister, but you know what? It's a term of endearment. I know he likes me. So, and when we're being obedient, the Father knows. He knows. He knows who we're talking to. And you know what? There's only one true God. There's only one. So he knows who we're talking to. So
Yeah.
I keep going off on site. This is one of my weak points. I tend to do this a lot. But so
Okay.
the change started with me really paying attention to the loving people that were already on this path that I knew must be been praying for me. And then like our friends, when they started going this way, I think they maybe either just started looking into it when they moved to this area or maybe just before. But, being able to talk face to face is very different. It's very different. You're seeing a person's who they really are, because text on a screen can never relay the emotions a person is feeling, and the love that they have, and how much they truly care for you, and how much they truly love the Father, and they just want to do what's right, just like we all do. We just want to serve the Father, and we want to do it the way he wants us to. And so yeah, it was kind of a little series of events that made me start to have a change of heart to say, okay, I need to look again. I need to, but again, with this whole, okay, be careful, Lord, please do not let me be deceived, because that's what I had been warned about. You're going to be deceived if you go down this way. And of course, I have had some people, when I took that step of faith and started sharing more about my faith, I'm like, this is going to upset people, but you know what? I don't care. I don't care. If it plants seeds, if it encourages others, I have to be honest about where I'm at and where God's led me. And I'm on fire for him like I've never been before. And I've been a believer all my life. I've loved the Lord all my life. I've wanted to serve him all my life, and I've served him in many ways. But nothing can compare to what has happened in my life and Patrick's life in this past year. Nothing. And I can only expect so much more, even with the hardships we've had to go through with him losing his father. And that was tough. There was so much to deal with there. And for those who follow my channel will know that there was this, Patrick and his dad, they went on this long trip together across the states and came back, and came back to Forks before he was gonna take them back down to California. And it was kind of a bucket list thing. And so the whole time, Patrick has this time with his dad in the last moments of his life where he can plant a little bit of seed, and he can plant a little bit more seed. And by this time, he's actually wearing his tassels, which I didn't know if he ever would. I never told him. I said, this is what I'm doing. I brought a skirt in here. I actually sew loops onto my skirts now, and then just attach them directly to the loops, so they're not on the waist and in my way. And this is what I'm doing, because I love, why was WWJD okay for people to wear on bracelets? But this is what God told us to do. And I love this idea. I love the fact that I can look at these, I can feel these, and be reminded of, what his word says, and be reminded of who I am and who I belong to. And so I just live by example. And finally, Patrick says, okay, fine, you can make me some, but they got to be short. So I made him some. They were about this long. those are too long. They got to be shorter. And they're little bitty things, but you know what? They're still enough. There's no direction on, God didn't say they have to be this long or this long. He wants something that's not going to get hung up while he's working in a shop, or like right now he's out re-roofing our woodshed. But it was still enough. It's still enough that people are asking questions like, what are these stringy things hanging off of you?
Wow. Well, okay, we've heard a little bit about your testimony. Can you tell us a little about what you do, about Rain Country, why you decide? For anyone, I'm sure most people already are familiar with your channel, but anyone who's not, can you tell us what it is it's about and why you started it, and maybe also why you started living that lifestyle off grid and everything? We're off grid, by the way, too. We're all solar, but
right. Yeah. Well, we're not entirely off grid. In fact,
okay.
All the lights you see right now are running on public power just because
Okay.
I don't have any. Well, no, not this light. This is actually plugged into our solar because we have solar outlets out there. So we kind of converted some things where we added to what we have. So we have solar and blah, blah, blah. But you lit Rain Country, remember? Clouds most of the time.
Yeah, I know. I was going to ask that too. Okay.
But, okay, so I started teaching ballet, mostly a little bit of tap, a little bit of jazz, but mostly ballet. Because, when I grew up in Wenatchee, that's what I studied. I was a ballerina all my life. Then I came here and decided, okay, I'm kind of stuck in this little town. And that's a whole nother story, but God led me. I didn't think so at first. It's like, why did you abandon me here? But this is where I was meant to be. And my husband, well, he wasn't my husband at the time. We were dating. And a few other people were encouraging me that, you should start teaching some ballet classes. This little town could really use it. I think at the time I moved here, there's like 3,000 people in this town. There might be a whole 4,000 now. Woo-hoo. So, and anyway, so there was a gym and I started teaching there, not sure what to expect. And it actually did pretty well. And then Patrick and I got engaged and his dad was selling this house and it had just a little 2-car garage that had been converted to a family room. And so it was half the size this room is right now. And we decided, we'll get married, we're moving in this house, we might as well just move the dance classes over here and I can save rent. And so that's what I did. And then that was in 1990 was when we got married. And then a few years later, the roof in here in the old room started, we were gone on a vacation when we came home and half of it was laying on the floor, or the ceiling, not the roof, the ceiling. And we're like, well, I think it's time for a new roof. And while we're at it, we might as well expand this room because my business was growing. And so we ended up doubling the size of this room, and that which is really nice when you got teenage dancers and they're doing big leaps across the room. Now they can do 2 or 3 instead of going from one wall and practically slamming into the other wall because the room was so small. And so that was great. We got mirrors, we got bars, they're still up over here. And then eventually my sons and I started taking Taekwondo, and we just had the guy come teach here. So we kind of had this trade going on, and then we all ended up getting our black belts, and then eventually we started our own classes. So, and that was great. That was what I was supposed to do for a time. But look, when we go back to that time in 2010 to 2012, when I was doing all the conspiracy theory stuff and getting all crazy, and, because they say that, when you first start down that road, it's about an 18-month period roughly for most people that they really go wacko and they want to believe everything. And then you have to pull back and say, whoa. Okay, let's just stop now and let's just kind of put our focus where it needs to be. So, but it was about that time that we realized the importance of being a little more self-sufficient. And I was already a homemaker. I had already been homeschooling my kids, and that was what the father had already led me to do. I was already one that liked to cook and bake from scratch. But And we had, we grew a few things like tomatoes, because tomatoes in the store never have flavor, and tomatoes are important to us. And so we already had the greenhouse, but then it was coming to the point that, okay, let's take this little. We just live on a little. Our this home is just on a shy 1/3 acre lot in a neighborhood, right on the corner. So because we have a corner, we have a little more space. And so we got rid of our above ground swimming pool, got rid of the trampoline, turned the whole backyard into a garden. And over the years, we've expanded. And then I started learning how to do more and more things. And a lot of the things that I do, making tinctures, growing the herbs, making deodorant and tooth powders and all these different things, a lot of times it's my own experiments. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. Yeah, and I just find I try different things and I find what works for me. And a lot of times I just make recipes up. And so then what happened was I would be sharing stuff on Facebook, and people were like, I might take a picture or something that I made, some homemade granola bars or whatever. Recipe, please. And I'm like, recipe? I don't have a recipe. I just threw it together. So I'm like, and there are a couple of people who are like, you should start a YouTube channel. YouTube channel. I don't know about that. But then the more people would do that, and eventually I retired from the dance, because even after 28 years I taught dance here. Interest from and dedication was just really, really dwindling. And it's really hard to try to pull off dance performances and stuff when you can't have kids that are going to stay dedicated. The parents just let them come and go as they please. And, it was getting worse through the years. And it was like, Taekwondo was a little better, but I didn't have as many in Taekwondo as I had in dance, but I did keep that going for one more year. But I just knew there was like this burning inside that, like, I just really believe the Father wants me to go somewhere else, or do something else, not go somewhere else, but do something else, and put more focus into the garden and into the homemaking stuff. And then, and by the way, we do have 2 other pieces of property just right down the road. We have a shy 1 acre piece, and then outside of town we have a 6 acre piece that Patrick's just starting to develop. But that's our mountain getaway place. So I kind of hope it never comes to that, but I'm grateful we have it. We've saved money because we're out of debt. We saved money for years to be able to buy more property and expand out. So at any rate, I finally thought, by this point I was watching I was watching Doug and Stacy, and I was watching Zach, American Homestead. And, I was watching some of these different channels, and I'm like, I don't know. I just don't think I have much more interesting to share, but fine, I'll give it a try. People want recipes. I don't have things written down. Maybe they can just watch me do stuff. They can just watch me and see, this is what I do. A little handful of this, a little, scoop of that. And of course, you still have people that want written recipes, and so through the years, I've obliged. But it started that way, and I didn't really know what all direction my channel was going to go. I thought I was just going to show people how to do stuff. Maybe I'll show them what I do in my garden, but I know what I do is going to be very different than what somebody else does, because we live in rain country, and our biggest issue is you can get too much rain. It can drown things. It can drown plants. If you put your snow peas in too soon, like some people can put their snow peas in January or February, but if you do that here, you're putting them in during the time of the year we're getting the most amount of rain. They're going to drown, and then you got to start all over. So there's things like that you got to work around. So it's got its own challenges for sure. And I'm thinking people aren't going to get it. Oh, and then the other things that we can grow really, really well here are slugs, mud, and rust. Oh, and moss. Those things all grow great here. And but I tell you what, chickens, people say you got to get ducks for slugs. I didn't want ducks. You can train your chickens to eat slugs. And ever since we've had chickens, I've had far less issues with slugs. Because when you live in a place that gets that much rain, you get more slugs than what the average person's going to get, because everything's wet. And that's when they like being out there, because it's wet and they can just kind of slide all over everything. So at any rate, my point is that I wasn't sure if I was going to do that. And I thought, you know what? There could be people that live in a climate like mine, or there could be people that live in just a little place that want to start learning how to do things on a small scale. Because that's what I was doing at the time. We didn't have these other pieces of property. In fact, we still do pretty much all of our gardening right here. I mean, we have blackberries and raspberries out at the other site, but we have that stuff here too. Um, the wild blackberries out there, the ones that they can just do whatever they want. And so, you know what? And it ended up being the right thing because I did get a lot of people that, people that live in apartments and people that they live in a neighborhood. And it's like, okay, what can I do in this small area? Because people are convinced they have to have 40 acres or 10 acres or whatever it is. And you know what? You can do a lot with just a little bit. And what I tell people is that every little bit, it matters. Even if all you can do is grow a few medicinal or um, culinary herbs in a window box, that's something. It's something that's going to help with your health. It's going to help add flavor to your food, and just wanting to teach people how to be a little more self sufficient, so they don't have to depend on the government to come in and save them because they won't. Um, and just to take better care of themselves, learn how to be more frugal, learn how to be more healthy, learn how to get away from the medical system as much as possible. Because I believe most people can do it. I mean, we went off our thyroid medications back in, well, 2012. But it was me doing research and study, and that was the only prescription medication we were on. And we had both been on them for 15 years. And then we were also taking over-the-counter painkillers and allergy medicines when we needed them. And I just felt compelled to get away from all of that, especially when I started learning how toxic things like, Tylenol is like one of the most toxic drugs on the market. And it's like, really? It's just so bad for you. So I'm like, okay, what can I do that's more natural that I can get rid of these frequent headaches that I get? And here's the interesting thing is when you start like with the headaches, I hardly get headaches anymore. But it used to be every week, at least one day a week, I'd get a headache all day long. And now they're rare. And that was one of the first things I noticed is when I started going more natural. I was like, it's not that you become dependent on the natural remedies. They help you get off of the synthetic medications. And then eventually you don't, and not for everyone, I'm not going to say everyone for every situation, but eventually you just don't need them at all or rarely. And then I did the same thing with thyroid. And people think, oh, what's the magic herb? It's not like that. It's not like that. It's about learning how to take care of your body better. Even though I've always been an active, more healthy kind of person or healthy minded, there's still those things that you just never think about because you trusted the doctors, you trusted this, you trusted that, you trusted the food supply coming from the store. And then you really, you trusted the Teflon pans that you were using that are terrible for your thyroid. Um, get rid of those. Get rid of if you can't, if you're on city water and your city fluoridates, find another water source. So that's why we put in our rainwater catchment system, is so that we could have control over what was in our water. And I think the water thing, I think that was the biggest factor in making it so that our bodies could heal themselves, because God made our bodies efficient. He made our bodies to heal themselves. We have a liver that flushes toxins out of our body, right? And yeah, as long as we're feeding our body correctly and we're living, this was the other thing, is a lot of times I think, what did people in the Bible do? They didn't go to gyms to be in shape. What did people in the Bible do? What did people 200 years ago do? They didn't go to gyms. How did they get in shape? They worked. They washed clothes by hand. Not that I do that all the time. I mean, we have a wash machine. It runs on solar power. But I do have an off-grid laundry system, and I practice. As soon as Patrick set it up for me, I was practicing on it every day because I wanted to get familiar with it. And let me tell you, when 2020 came around, that was when our washing machine finally died. And do you think you could get a wash machine anytime soon? 6 weeks it took. 6 weeks I was washing clothes by hand. And it was a great experience. I was ready. I was all set up for it. And, but it's exercise, it's movement, getting out in the garden, getting fresh air, getting sun when that great ball of fire finally decides to show its face and forks, getting out there and getting some sun and the vitamin D. Um, the way we were created, it's a way he created us to live. And when we can live that way, we can be more healthy, and we don't need to depend on big pharma and all this outside stuff that God never intended us to be on. So to me, that's kind of that ministry too. It's not like I trying to tell people that, oh, you can stop taking everything. Everybody's going to be different. And, some people are, they've got a long road to go, but we can all, just like with the getting yourself in a better situation, self-sufficiency wise, you can do the same thing with your health. If you're wheelchair bound, there's something you can do. There's some kind of movement you can do. Even if it's the smallest movement, it's still movement. Even if it's just trading out the store-bought, macaroni and cheese for homemade with organic cheese and organic noodles. Or pasta. There's always all these little steps that we can do to make things better. And we should never feel like, the same thing goes with our spiritual walk. When you come to Torah, you feel like, oh, I got to do it all right now. I got to do it all right now. Sorry, I'm like jiggling the computer. I'm
okay.
getting excited. But, you feel like you got to have this massive garden, and I got to be canning, all this stuff. And I've got to, have 5 years worth of food storage put up and whatever it is. No, you don't. You just got to start somewhere. You just got to start somewhere and take it one day at a time. And you learn as you go. And the Father he blesses that. He blesses that when we're faithful. I remember there's scripture. I mean, there's a lot of scripture we need to have faith. We need to trust him first and foremost, not ourselves, not our things. But he also says the prudent man foresees the evil and he hideth himself. And we know that Joseph, he didn't expect God to come down and fill the silos himself. Noah did not expect God to come down and build the ark himself. They had to be obedient to what the Father was showing them that to do. And for each person, again, that could be different. And it's just staying open and praying and trusting him to lead one step at a time. Yeah. I mean, how do you eat an elephant? Oh, we don't eat elephants. That's right. They're unclean. Unclean. How do you eat a giraffe? Apparently those are clean. One bite at a time.
So you've made some lifestyle changes that helped you get off those medicines. Were there any natural herb things you did at the same time, or not really?
For the thyroid, I did do some, just like I started growing stinging nettle out here, right in front of a window, a bedroom window. Like if I'm going to put it anywhere and put it up against a bedroom window, it will do double duty because it's kind of like people aren't going to want to climb in a window that has stinging nettle in front of it. But stinging nettle is just awesome. It's really great for your thyroid health. And I learned about that. So I started growing stinging nettle because I didn't want to I don't have time to go look for it out in the woods somewhere. I want to grow it here. But the other thing too is that as we for me, for the headaches, I started off with just using some essential oils. Lavender and rosemary are great. Just rub a little bit under my nose and immediately headache would go away. Until I had a chance to start growing my own herbs and start, the main one I started with for pain was feverfew. And then over the years, I developed a recipe because feverfew is terrible tasting. So I developed a recipe with feverfew, valerian leaf, catmint, and echinacea leaf, and then I make my tincture out of homemade wine and raw honey, and it works great, and it's not so terrible going down like it used to be. But I'll even eat it raw if I have to. If it's growing fresh, I'll go out there and I'll eat that. But that might be for pain. But here's the thing: as we're finding other ways to be more natural for even dealing with headaches or dealing with common cold, with the elderberry and making your own elderberry syrup and your own elderberry tincture. All these things help all the way around, because see, now you're not taking that Tylenol or the ibuprofen or the acetaminophen. Now you're not taking that over-the-counter allergy medicine, which the weird thing about the allergy thing is we just stopped taking them. We didn't try to do anything different. I'm not saying we never have problems with our allergies, but they're so mild. They're practically non-existent. But yet when we were taking the over-the-counter allergy medicine, we still were dealing with it. But at any rate, as you're getting away from the synthetic drugs, then your body can better heal itself, because now that's less toxins that the liver has to try to push out. You're not putting so much work on the liver. And yeah, I mean, it all pays off.
Are there general principles about using herbs as medicine for people that have no idea what they're doing or have never tried this at all? Because so many people are used to chemical medicines, and they often say, and there's usually instructions like, don't take this more than 4 times in 24 hours, but herbs, do they have the same thing, or can you just eat as much as you want, whenever you want, or...
Well, that's going to depend on the herb, and it's also going to depend on the person, because, people who are allergic to, like, people have a lot of people are allergic to ragweed, which means anything in the ragweed family, which feverfew, dandelion, I mean, anything that's pretty much an aster, that might be problematic. So it's really about the person. And sometimes it just takes trial and error. And so I always say, start small, start with small amounts, find what works for you. Some people might want to take their herbs and powder them up and make their own capsules, which is a real pain in the rear. But for some people, they might be able to handle that better than trying to take a tincture where you can taste it. I like a tincture because I don't have to hassle with making the capsules, which I've done. I've done, and I do still have some if we absolutely have to take them. But with the capsules, you got to buy the little gel caps and whatnot. And then there's teas. Teas are practically free to make, especially when you're growing your own herbs. That was the other thing. I tend to sometimes get digestive issues. Well, I grow peppermint. You just go cut some peppermint, throw it in a pot with some water and heat it up, and now you got some peppermint tea. And then through the winter, when it's not growing, well, I've got a bunch dried up, I do the same thing. Peppermint's great for digestive health. Ginger's great for digestive health. I mean, and here's the beauty of this, that the great creator, he gave us so many different herbs, knowing that each one of us was going to be unique and diverse in our own body and what's going to work for us. And so there's like, when I start compiling herbs, so I'll do these videos where I compile herbs for, like one of the first ones I did was the many different herbs for pain. And even then, I still had many that I didn't get included in there. And so I'm like, this is actually a really good idea. I need to do more of this. Instead of just teaching people just what I do for me, here's a list of herbs. And then what happens is when I put that list out there, and I usually will type it up for people too, to make it easy for them. They can just go to the link and copy and paste or whatever. Then other people will come in and say, and they might even have ideas that totally were not on the list, or ideas that were on the list, and they might share, yeah, this one works for me. And so people can read those comments and then they can learn from that too, because I know what works for me, but it's not going to work for Joe Schmo down the road, and so yeah, it's just about learning and trying things, and again, starting small and working your way up. Whenever I think, yeah, sometimes we think, well, because it's natural, I'm just going to guzzle down this whole, half gallon of tincture that I made and see if it helps. Well, if you made it with high proof alcohol, it will help in some form. I'll tell you that. Probably not in the way you think. But so really, when a doctor prescribes you medications, they're just guessing how much you need too. They'll say, this is how much you need, but you're very unique than the last person they prescribed this to. It could be too much or too little. But you're not going to go home and say, okay, well, the doctor said I need to take one of these a day. Okay, I'll take the whole bottle. No, you're not going to do that. And the same thing applies to herbs. You're going to, you regulate yourself, even though they're more natural, even though you're less likely to have issues with it, or there's still going to be things about your own body you may not know. Like I said, allergies or certain other underlying conditions that can cause issues with that. What is it? There's like with licorice root, people who have, I think it's hypertension, who have chronic high blood pressure, they got to be careful with taking licorice roots. And there's a lot of things like that. And I don't know it all because I learn as I go. And then I do a video on it, and then I learn a little bit more, and then I do a video on it. I don't have all this up here. I didn't take an herbalist course. I don't have a degree in anything medical, or I just learn and then I do. And mostly my learning comes from just doing. Isn't that funny? That's kind of how it applies scripture too. Just like learning about the feast. That reminds me, I'm going to backtrack again. I hope you don't mind, because I don't want to forget to say this, that when we were sitting at our friend's house and we're kind of talking about the feast, I don't know if it was when we were out there for Yom Teruah or not, but I said, I remember when we were in the Nazarene church and the pastor was preaching a sermon out of Nehemiah about, and I remember the people, wasn't it, they found the book of the law and they realized they weren't keeping God's law and they repented. And so I'm like, I just started going through Nehemiah, looking. I think it's Nehemiah 8. I think that's right. And when I read that story, I was like, this is us. This is so us, because they found that law just in time for the Feast of Tabernacles, and they went all out. And I'm not going to say we went all out, because we live in Rain Country. So, we didn't like have the time to plan all this big camping thing and the rain and the whatever, you never know what to expect. It might be sunny right now, which it is, but that doesn't mean 5 minutes from now it's not going to be, pouring down rain, because that's the way it is around here. Not that we don't make sacrifices, we should. But we did what we could right here in this room. I bought some kind of sheer type fabric and made a covering to cover this whole area and decorated it. And it was fun. And we went back and forth to our friends. They had their own little sukkah that they did in their house. And so we'd go back and forth. And sorry, I keep hitting the mic. I'm Italian. Okay. So, and it was really great. But what the best part of it was for me was like realizing these feasts, these Moedim, they're not just, oh yeah, this is something that it's a good thing to learn about. Because I remember thinking, well, I think it's a good thing to learn about. So why didn't I learn about it sooner? Then you start doing it and you're like, why did the church ever start adding Easter and Christmas and this and that and the other thing? It was never necessary, let alone God didn't want us to do it in the first place. He already gave us his holy days. He gave them to us, starting off with the Sabbath right there in Genesis. And when we do these and we learn about them, we learn what they mean, it's just like, wow, it's just so eye-opening and exciting. I mean, I get chills just thinking about it, and that moment, when I realized we are the people from Nehemiah, and we are the ones that we're just like where they were at. And then later, I think it's in Josiah that Josiah again, the law had kind of been lost, and then they found it, and then that one, what was that? It was just before another one. Was it just before Passover or some other holy time? And same thing all over again. The people are like, oh, we got to repent. Now we got to do this. We got to do this thing. And that's what it's like. That's really what it's like when you realize, oh, I want to do this now. It's not just like, oh, I should. Oh, yeah, you probably should. It's probably a good idea. No, you want to, you desire to, because it's not even just, obviously it's about wanting to please the Father. But when you start realizing this relationship and what you're learning and how much more you get to know him and who he is and what he's done and what he will do, I mean, the weight all this has is just, it's a good weight. It's incredible, but not like the weight people want to say that, what is it? He said, yeah, it's not a burden. My yoke is easy and my burden is light. And that it's not a burden. But it's, what I mean by weight is that it's just this, I don't know. I mean it in a good way. It's exciting. It's so exciting. I know you understand what I'm saying. And I know a lot of people out there that are already in this understand what I'm saying. But what I hope is that people that might be watching this just because they know me from Rain Country Homestead, I pray, I pray that they can see the joy and how non-burdensome it is. It's not about coming under the chains of some law. It's about the freedom of serving God the way he wants us to serve him. And then being that peculiar people, being separate from the world. And you just, I'm kind of stumbling now, but sometimes I just can't even put it all into words because it's such a beautiful thing that it's not crazy. It's God's word. It's God's word. It's what he said. Yes. Can you tell? I am. I am. And the change in my husband, has been really amazing as well. I'm not saying we don't sit down as we're going through some of these scriptures and, you're going through Judges again. And it's like, boy, that sure was a lot of killing and blood. Oh, more killing and blood, more killing and blood. But the more you study and the more you understand who God is and why he did this and why he demanded or commanded this, it all starts to fall together and make sense. We're still going to have questions. We're all still learning. We're all like, one of the things I liked about what Zach would say is like, we're all new to Torah because we're all always learning, and we should be. If we ever reach a point where it's like, oh yeah, I know it all. Well, not only are we being prideful, you're wrong for one, and you're just going to stop growing and you're going to stagnate. And that goes with anything. That goes with anything in life. If we think we've arrived, if we think we know all there is to know about herbs or about homesteading or about being a parent or a grandparent or what God's word says, then we're going to stop growing. We have to keep moving. We have to keep growing. We I think that in my walk through this, I'm 58 years old. So through the 58 years of my life, I definitely had moments of stagnation. And you kind of get on fire and you start, and then it just kind of becomes this, okay, yeah, I go to church, I play the bass, I play the guitar, I sing a little bit, I play the drums, which is fun. I love playing drums. But what is that really? What does that really have any meaning to it? Am I really, I mean, I would have to stop. I love playing bass. It's fun. But why am I here? Why am I up here strumming this bass? What is it doing for me and my relationship with the Father? What is it doing for those people out there and their relationship with the Father? Am I even supposed to be here? Sometimes we have to stop and question, because if we're just stagnating in our faith and all we're doing is in church is stuff because it's fun, it pleases us, then maybe we need to stop and question why we're doing what we're doing. And that was one of the reasons I left. It wasn't just because, I looked at the church and it's all full of this and that and whatever. And it was because I knew that the Father was drawing me away because I needed to learn some things. I didn't know it was going to take a whole 12 years to come to this point, but I believe there was a reason why. I don't think it was just because I was being um, rebellious and not wanting to learn. I mean, there was a fear. I didn't want to do the wrong thing. But I think, I keep thinking about that moment. It's like when I was standing there at the church and saying, what about these days that we're supposed to be celebrating? Aren't there days we're supposed to be celebrating? And why it didn't go farther than that, I do still believe that God's timing is perfect and he had a reason. And one of the reasons I believe this is because I needed to, I had other lessons I needed to learn. I needed to get my channel going. I needed to see other people walking this path and observe them for a time, so that when I came out, because I did a faith-based video a while back, and this was before this. And now I'm coming out with a little bit different story. Here was the person that was going, nope, I don't want to hear it. No, 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 no. Who's this crazy redheaded guy on this video? Who is this guy? Well, wait a minute. He really has an important story to tell. I'm going to listen to that again. And now here I am on this other side. And that my prayer and my hope is that by being that person, is I don't want to hear about Yah or Yeshua, or I don't want to hear about the Torah. I don't want to be deceived. So just don't even talk to me about that stuff. That was me. Now this is me. This is the real me. This is who I was meant to be all along. And that's what I want people to see. And my prayer is just so strong that even if just one person can hear this and know that if the Father can change my heart and bring me to his truth, he can do the same for you. You just have to be willing to listen and read. Again, it's not about what this person here says. It's not even about what I say. It's about what the Father has to say to you. If you truly desire to serve him, if you truly desire to show your gratitude for what he's done, then you're going to want to learn who he is. And it starts by going back to Genesis.
Then if someone maybe watches Rain Country, loves your stuff, and is listening to this now, and is thinking, well, all right, I'm sort of interested, is that where you would tell them to start reading Genesis? Do you have any other advice? Anything to avoid, maybe? Maybe it's a loaded question.
I really, some people ask me, they'll send me emails, well, who do you listen to? And a lot of times sometimes I'll share, because I listen to a little bit of this and a little bit of that. I like some Almond House. I like listening, even though Zach's not putting out any new videos on New to Torah, I still go back and listen to some of his stuff. I listen to some 119. One thing I like about them is they're very thorough. They break everything down. Sometimes it's almost too much information. And so you have to go, okay, whoa, whoa, whoa. But it's great. It's great that they're that thorough. And then maybe I'll go listen to this person and that person. And, they all have their things. But the thing about why I have a hard time with that is, again, I just think everybody, no matter where they're at, no matter what they believe that they think is right, everybody needs to go back to the scripture and read it for themselves and pray to the Father to open your eyes to his truth, not Zach's truth, not my truth, not 119's truth or whoever else, his truth, because that's where you have to start. From there, then you can say, okay, is there someone I can reach out to that maybe can help me? That's fine. That's fine. I mean, we all, we talk with our friends, and even our friends, we were just at dinner with them last night. We have areas that we differ on. We don't fight. We don't argue. We don't hate on each other. We're iron sharpening iron, and we're learning as we go. And we do need that. That is important. But you have to start with the basics, with what was I was just saying last night. So, because we also do on Saturdays, Patrick and I, even though we're doing the 5 chapters, at least 5 chapters a night, sometimes 10 in the scripture, from Genesis all the way through, we're also doing the Torah portions on Saturday. so we can make sure that we're on the same page as everyone else. And that way, when we get together with them, well, they've been reading that same portion, or maybe they listen to a teaching on that same portion, so that when we come together to discuss stuff, we have that to base it off of. And so one of the things I was sharing last night is that in Deuteronomy, whichever chapter it was in this last portion, where it was talking about how the Father was telling his people, you must have balanced weights and measures. And the question kind of struck me is like, who then has the balanced weight and measure? Is it the priest? I'm assuming it's the priest. They have the balanced weights. Somebody has to have the standard that's got to be weighed against. Somebody has that standard. So when it comes to our faith, what is our standard? It's not a ministry. It is the Word of God. The whole Word of God, all of it, because it all goes together. We can't disregard one side or the other. It all has to go together.
Right.
That's your standard.
Sovereign morality has to be written by him. You're right.
Yes. Right.
I love talking about the spiritual stuff and the Torah and all of this. We can keep talking about that. Katie has a couple more herbal things, though, which, if you want. Well, okay. Let's say you're a newbie, a rube to the whole natural medicine thing. Can you just tell us what a poultice and what a tincture is? What is this stuff?
Here's the funny thing about tinctures is everybody's going to have their idea of what a tincture really is and how to make it. But for the most part, a tincture is you take a bunch of herbs, you throw them in a jar, you throw some kind of solvent over the top of it. What's the solvent? Well, the solvent is the thing that's going to pull the benefits out of that herb. That could be, depending on how strong you want it to be, that could be vodka. That's usually the cheapest thing. That could be, some people will go as high as Everclear, which that's not my personal choice. I personally also don't recommend it, but other people do. It's going to be, I say do your own research on that one. You remember I was saying earlier, I tend to make stuff up as I go. And it's like, I'm always looking at ways that, how can I have a solvent? Oh, and by the way, alcohol-free solvent can be made with raw honey and homemade vinegar. You can do store-bought, but I recommend homemade because it's one of the easiest things to do. Wine is just as easy to make too. There's a couple steps are a little bit different. But I combine vinegar, raw honey, 50-50 blend. That's your solvent. I usually fill my herbs up, if they're dried, about halfway up the jar. I like to put a lot in there and then top it off with a solvent, shake it, stir it really good, and then let it sit for a couple months. The nice thing about what's called an oxymel, the raw honey and the vinegar, is that's safe for children. Obviously people will say, well, you shouldn't give raw honey to a baby under 1. Okay, yeah, but there's a lot of children that are older than 1. So you know what I mean. But you can also do glycerin and water. So usually you do 3 parts glycerin to 1 part water. You have to have the water because glycerin's like syrup. And so the water is going to reduce the viscosity so that it can extract better. So that is a honey-free, alcohol-free option. So again, it's all going to depend on the person, who you're giving it to. Some people have to avoid alcohol altogether. Now, my favorite thing to do is my homemade wine, because I make it myself out of our own grapes, our own apples, our own rhubarb or blackberries, or maybe a mix of some of these things. And I can make it myself for virtually free. And then I can use that. And a lot of times I'll still add honey to that to kind of reduce the alcohol, but to add a better flavor. It definitely makes a better flavor than vinegar and honey, which isn't bad, but wine and honey is definitely better. And to me, that works really good. So don't be afraid to experiment. But yes, that's going to be your tincture. A lot of times I'll call them extracts because the word tincture some people say, well, that only means using a high proof alcohol. Okay, whatever. It's an extract. They're all extracts. So I just call it extract. We'll play it safe. And then you ask, poultice would be something like one of my favorite stories to share. because I don't have to do this very often, but one of my favorite ones is, and this has happened to me twice now, working out in the garden. We tend to get yellow jackets around here. And then usually like later in summer and fall, they get kind of ornery. They get mean, like for no reason. They'll just come up and sting you for the heck of it. Well, that's not really what happened. I'm kind of lying there, but I mean, they do that. But for me, it was like, they might land on you. You're busy. You're not thinking about it. You slap at something. Oh, I just got stung by a yellow jacket. Oh, let's see. Oh, look, there's plantain. Plantain. It grows everywhere. And take a leaf of that, chew it up, stick it on there. So you just masticate it a little bit, stick it right on there. 2 minutes at most. Not only was the sting completely gone, it didn't even leave a mark. We're talking about a wasp here. And same thing happened, I think last year. The same thing happened to me. I never even saw it. Something, I'm like, did I get bit? What was that? And I noticed the thing is starting to hurt more and more and more. And I'm like, I didn't just get poked by something. I got stung. It probably was another stupid wasp. Same thing, plantain, put it on there, within 2 minutes, gone. No mark, no swelling, no redness, nothing, no pain. And it's just amazing when you learn this stuff. And, but yeah, that's a form of a poultice, or it can be where you wrap it. I've actually done that with a few things. I've broken my toe. I'm good at breaking toes. I was a ballerina too. So, standing on the tips of my toes. But I'm also, even though I'm a dancer, I'm also kind of klutzy in just my regular day-to-day stuff. So whacking my toes on something. A soak in, Epsom salts, hot water with some comfrey and arnica is amazing. It's amazing. It does actually, you wouldn't think an herb could help heal a bone break. It does. It really does. And this is coming from someone who's broken. One time I broke one of my toes early on in the dance year. And it happened because first I smacked my toe on something dumb. And then the next day I was going to teach dance, and it was my point class. So I put on my point shoes, and that's where you stand on the tips of your toes. And the box is really tight on your feet. So a lot of people think all the weight's going on the tips of your toes, but it's not. It's actually going across the tops of your toes, along the sides. It's that whole end of your foot. But so I'm dancing around, and because my toes are so constricted, I didn't feel any pain. My students leave. I take off my point shoe, and my toe is doing this. It's crooked. It was the same toe I smacked. So what had happened was I probably got a minor fracture. And well, it wasn't bent that badly. I'm exaggerating a little bit to to make a point, but it was bent. It was bent to the side, and I'm like, and it was big. And now that the blood flow could get to it, it just immediately swelled up. I'm like, oh my goodness. And it was like one of my middle toes, because my middle toes are a little bit longer, so they're more apt to get that pressure put on them. And it took months and months for that to heal. I thought it was never going to heal. There was a lady that had her daughter in dance. It was a nurse practitioner. And I said, I'm wondering if I should go to the doctor, if I should go in and get this looked at, because it's not healing. And she looks at it and she goes, well, here's the deal. We can re-break it and put a pin in it. Nah, forget it. So I just let it heal on its own. And since then, I've broken that toe again anyway. But that was the one I broke a few years ago, and did a video on it talking about the soak. And I couldn't believe how fast the healing was on that in comparison to that year. Of course, I was still teaching dance, and it's kind of hard to not, do stuff when you're teaching. But yeah, it was a huge difference. Huge difference. I forgot to say the soak was with, I might have said plantain. The soak itself for the break, that's with comfrey. Comfrey is, I think it's also known as knit bone, because it helps knit the bones back together. Where plantain, you're going to look at that as being really good for helping to heal wounds, cuts, scratches, burns, bites. Yeah. But you can eat it. So it can be a great vegetable if you don't mind the stringy bits, which I hate.
Well, what are some must-have natural remedies that everyone should try to get their hands on? put in their medical cabinet, quote unquote.
So again, that kind of comes back to where you live and what's going to grow best for you, as well as what's going to work best for you. You don't want to try to always, even though I say keep trying with something you really want to grow, like I did with marshmallow. I didn't think I was ever going to get it to grow. Now it's everywhere. It's everywhere. But it's a great herb for many things. But at the same time, when you learn about what's grows naturally in your own climate, like here, like mullein doesn't grow naturally here, though I do now finally have some growing because I finally decided I really want some growing. But we have lots of usnea because we get a lot of rain, we get a lot of moss, and usnea is a great, the old man's beard, and that's great for lung health and other things. We have, plantain and dandelion. Most people already have that growing somewhere around their property. Might not even realize what plantain is. They just see it as a weed. Just like people saw dandelion as a weed, yet it was brought over by the Europeans because of its medicinal properties. Same thing with feverfew. It was brought over by the Europeans because it's just so effective for reducing fevers and for pain and inflammation. And that grows like a weed here. But yeah, I mean, it's about, just because somebody talks about like elderberry, black elderberry, for instance, which I do grow it. But I think red elderberry grows better here, and it can be used in a similar way, but the black elderberry is going to have a lot more antioxidants. So it's going to be really good for colds and flus. But again, you got to find, you might struggle trying to grow this stuff because it's just not the climate for it. So you got to find the herb sometimes if you just learn about, oh, what's that over there? Like I found out that turkey tail mushroom. Well, of course, it's a mushroom. Mushrooms love lots of water. Turkey tail mushroom grows great around here. And that's good for a lot of things. It's, it's anti-cancer. It's good for colds and flus. It's just great for a lot of things. It's, I think, high in antioxidants as well. What else? I mean, there's just a lot of stuff. I'm always learning something new. Like I just learned I've got self-heal because I gave my garden a sabbatical rest this year. Well, as such, I'm not doing anything. And I go, oh, what's that coming up? Huh. Oh, that's self-heal. I've heard people talk about that. So I did a video on that. I've got self-heal now because I just let my garden rest and let it do whatever it wanted. And, so I learn about these things as I find something new popping up in my garden that I've never seen before. So you don't always have to run out and try to plant something because somebody on the other side of the world is growing it, or somebody in Rain Country is growing it. But I live in Ohio where we don't get that much rain. I need to find something that's already growing here naturally. And most likely you have dandelions and plantain. Dandelion as a whole, it's great for a lot of things. The root, the leaves, the flower, the stem, the sap, all of it. There's so many benefits in just dandelion alone. It's incredible. It's incredible. I knew there was a reason when I was a little girl why I liked dandelions so much, even though everybody said they were a weed. Liars.
How do you think we lost all this information over the years? Like, you're saying all of these names that I bet many people maybe who don't watch your stuff have no idea what they self-heal. What is all this stuff? I mean, how did we lose all of this? It seems like one of the most important aspects of life.
Well, I think it's a combination of a lot of things. There's money to be made off of getting people to believe they have to have synthetic chemicals, because that can be, what's the word? I'm trying to say copyrighted, not that word. You know what I mean?
Patented.
They can
maybe.
own that. Patented. Thank you. They can patent those things. They create it, and then they can patent it, and then they can sell it to you for far more money than it would cost you to go pick that thing. So and then there's a laziness factor. So it's so much, it comes back to our faith too. It's so much easier to trust somebody else to tell us what we should take, what we should read, what we should do, what we should believe. Okay, the doctor said to take this and everything will be fine. Gee, now why do I have this wrong with me? I guess I better go get another drug for that. Oh, here, take this. We'll take care of that, which was actually a symptom caused from this first drug, and then on and on and on it goes. And so it just becomes, and for most of us, it was our parents were the ones that really started getting into, like my mom, she trusted her doctors far too much. And I think she could still be alive today if it wasn't for that. And I mean, she did finally start asking questions at the end because I kept pushing her, Mom, why do they have you on 4 different antidepressants at once when you're not even depressed? Crazy stuff like that. And so she started asking. And when she started asking, then they started taking her off some of this excess junk she needed to be on. And she did start getting at least mentally better, because she was to the point where she was like, I was sure she was like Alzheimer's, dementia, all that. But then when they took her off all this excess junk she needed to be on, she actually started, at least mentally, coming back around. She was like my own mom again. We could actually have a conversation. She knew who I was. She knew that I only had 2 boys, not 5 children, like one time she thought I had. So it all started because we want to believe the people in the white coats. We want to believe, and there was a time, and I still believe there are good doctors out there that want the best for their patients. I would never want to badmouth the whole medical community, but money's a big thing. Everybody loves money. And if you can get kickbacks and you can get this, then eventually what's going to happen, it's going to be all about, how can I get more of this so I can keep this lifestyle? And you stop caring about the people that you originally went into this job for. And again, the laziness. So one of the things I always try to teach people is that you have a personal responsibility. So I'm going to keep coming back to the faith on this. It applies to our faith too. We have our own personal responsibility. If we expect to be spoon-fed everything while we're sitting in the pew from somebody up there who might mean well, who might have a lot of really good and right information, but if we're just only trusting them to spoon feed us, we're only trusting these doctors to give us what we need, and we're not taking personal responsibility to learn, what do I really need? What is it I'm really supposed to do? Then now our faith is where it is in the completely wrong place. And it's easy. It's the lazy way. So, I mean, and that even applies to people that come to me and say, well, what can I do for this, that? It's like, well, I'm not a doctor. I don't know you. I don't know what you need. So here's what I can give you. Here's the information. And also, while you're at it, here's a video I did on how you can do your own research and tailor it to suit you, so you can find, just like I did when we were going off the thyroid medication and I made that decision. I had to do my own research. I had no one to talk to. There's no naturopathic doctors here. I had to figure it out. I had to find out how to do it myself. And at that time, you couldn't even find YouTube videos or places online that were talking about natural remedies for thyroid health. It was really hard to find. But I was able to find enough to know what I needed to cut out and what I needed to add. Like add in some ashwagandha root or coffee or some, maca root. That's why I came up with the jet fueled latte blend. That was for the purpose of helping us heal our thyroids. And we don't drink that much anymore, but it did help get us in the right direction. So we don't even have to be dependent on that now, because ashwagandha root's nasty tasting.
Was it partially your mom's experience there being quote unquote overprescribed, I guess you could say, that made you interested in this, or were you already on the pathway of natural medicine?
I was one that was always interested in health. Even, as a teenager, I'd read any magazines. Back then there was a magazine, I don't even know if it still exists anymore, but at the time there was a magazine called Shape it was actually all about health. And I prescribed to that, I subscribed to that magazine. And then later years, it became all about fashion and stupid stuff that doesn't matter. So dumb. But anyway, I would subscribe to that magazine because I wanted to learn about health. And, so through the years, I started learning a little bit here and there, even while I was still teaching dance and martial arts, because, that's a healthy thing. It was important to me to teach my students just how to be healthy. It wasn't about them trying to have a ballerina body, because that's unhealthy. I knew better than that. It's about them being healthy for who they are and getting away from the sodas and getting away from the diet sodas, especially. They're even worse than the sugar loaded sodas. Well, I don't know, maybe not now because those all have corn syrup in them, but at any rate, so I'd learn about this stuff as I go, and I try to pass some of this information on to my students. I would share it on my Facebook account, and I was starting to learn about spices and herbs and things like, oh, I feel like learning about cloves. What's the benefits of cloves? I love cloves. And I'd be like, oh, wow, this is so cool. And I'd share that information on Facebook. And some people didn't care, but some people are like, oh, that's neat.
I'm just wondering if your mom's experience was the impetus at all. I don't know.
I'm sorry. To an extent, yes. So I already had that interest. But then as I saw through the years, as the years went on, my mom's health kept getting, she was diabetic, in her 30s. And it's like, I don't want to turn out like that. And, things just kept, her health kept going down and down and down and down. I mean, obviously you're going to get older. Things, we're meant to age. We're going to get gray hair. I'm fine with that. Now, obviously this isn't a sign of poor health. This is just, I'm supposed to be proud of this, right? But, we're not made to live in these bodies forever. So we also have to face up to the fact that we're going to get older. And my eyesight's not what it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, but that's just a part of life. But about the rest of our life, about living, about, if we treat our body like the temple we believe it is, then we're going to find that health that we're meant to have for whatever age we're at. And those are the things. So yes, watching my mom's health go down, especially later years, as I realized she's trusting the doctors for everything. She's buying everything they tell her instead of trying to figure out what's the root of the problem. Do you think they ever told her, how about you stop eating so much junk? How about you stop, how about you get a little more exercise? No. She was a great, client. She brought them a lot of money. And I get kind of angry when I think about, it's like, I kind of wish that I would have been a little more forceful with my mom in earlier years, but I felt like I still wasn't sure how much, there's still this fear. It's like, well, what if I tell mom to go off these medications, but maybe those ones she really needs? And I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I just know what I know so far. You just do what you can. But yes, that was definitely some of the catalyst.
At this point, with your experience with the natural remedies and stuff, do you think there's any room for quote unquote pharmaceuticals, or do you think everything could be replaced by natural herbs?
That's a tricky question, because I do believe there's times that sometimes, like some people will say, well, do you believe that the Father gave these doctors and scientists some wisdom? Yes. And there are times that certain medications that are synthetic, that aren't going to be healthy for us, can at least help get things under control, so that then we can find more natural ways to go about it, so that then we can put this aside. I think there are definitely times, and I would never want to say there weren't, because I think that's, as much as I really want to believe that everything can be solved naturally, and I just think, especially in this day and age, because we're exposed to so much junk, no matter how healthy we try to eat, we can't control what's in our air. We can't so we can't always control what we're breathing in. And even if we're on our own rainwater system that we filter the water, we still can't always control everything that ends up in there. But the same thing goes with city water. And so, yeah, I mean, we've been all of our lives exposed to one toxin after another, after another, after another. And we are paying the price in so many different ways. And so sometimes, yes, there has to be a point for some people, especially I think the older you are, if you waited that long. to get a hold. It's just like my mom. That was the other thing too. It's like, as old as she is now and as bad a condition as she is, how much of this could she actually get off and still be able to survive? Because now her body's so completely dependent on it. And there's just a lot of healing that has to happen. But as believers, we also know that who the great healer is and who we can trust, and we can approach everything in prayer and have ask for his wisdom, and he can show us. Just know that they're making merchandise of you. And when you go to the doctor, find the one that's going to listen to you. Like I shared a story on one of my natural remedy testimonies videos, and I love this lady's story. And she did have to go to the doctor. And one of the things is she'll stand up and say, well, I've done my research on this and this is what I learned. What do you think about me trying this? And her doctor was actually pretty good, but she had a doctor that said, no, that's not going to, no, you got to do what I do. Okay, you're fired. You're fired. You can fire your doctor. You are their boss. You go to them for advice. You pay them. You're paying them. You have a right to fire them. So find a doctor that will listen to you, that's willing to work with you and say, I want to be as natural as I can. Here's what I've learned. Share with them the information, bring in documentation to show the proof. And like we'd been off, like, okay, so Patrick has, he has a CDL because so he can drive his big dump truck and other such things. Well, to keep a CDL, at least I don't know how it is across the states, but at least in Washington State, you have to get a physical done every 2 years. Well, keep in mind, we've been off their thyroid medication for 12 years. And so for a while there, it'd be like there was one doctor who was like, well, it shows here in your chart that you were on thyroid medication. You still taking it? Nope, haven't taken it in years. What? The doctor just freaked out and demanded he had a blood test done. And of course, we had to pay for that. And nothing. No word back. Nothing. Next several times he went for CDL, the one doctor asked, and he said, no, I haven't been taking that in years. Oh, okay. I was like, really? I was in there with him. I'm like, really? Okay, cool. He's like, yeah, we decided to go out and we've been doing that. Okay, that's good, he actually said. I'm like, shocker. And then the last couple of times, nobody even asked. They just tell him, wow, you're healthier than most men 20, 30 years younger than you. So that was good enough for them. His blood pressure's good. His all that stuff is good. So that should say a lot.
So it's just like the different doctors something might be very important to them and others not at all. Okay.
Right. And different doctors are going to, even if they're in the same field, you are going to have doctors that do find natural things important. They want to learn about that, but that's something they have to do on their own. And they have to be careful. They can't really recommend it because they can get in trouble. They're required to prescribe a drug. But if you ask them, well, what do you think about this? Okay, you can try that. And what was it? Was it Dr. Jennifer Daniels? There was some doctor that was saying that they found that when they gave their patients an option, well, you could take this drug, or you could go, stop eating this and start eating that, and start getting a little bit of exercise. Maybe, add this to your diet. They found that most people would take the more natural way when they gave them the option. But they have to at least give them the option. They have to at least offer the prescription medication. So a good doctor will give you an option. And that's another thing to know. So this is coming from someone who hasn't been to a doctor herself, and I don't even know how many years, maybe 15. I don't know. It's been a long time.
But you do all these amazing testimonial videos on your channel where you read testimonials of viewers who've been cured of all manners of sicknesses by natural means. And okay, you mentioned one, but do any of the other, just before I forget this, do any other stories stand out to you from those testimonials? Like anything like, oh, that everyone has to hear that. Or
Oh gosh, I wouldn't even remember which number it is because I have several of them out there, but there's several amazing ones. People who were managed to cure themselves or a family member of, or at least help cure them of something like cancer, or I mean something serious. Gosh, I don't know. There's a lot of them out there, and some of them are more mild, simple stuff, but they're great too because that's mostly the kind of stuff we deal with. But even the serious stuff, uh, I wish I could. At top of my head,
people will
yeah.
go through
I
your
have a
channel, they'll
playlist.
find it. They'll
Yeah, they have a playlist. It's on natural remedy testimonies, and like I said, I think there's like 13 in there right now. I think. So, and then I usually read, depending on how long they are, anywhere from 3 to 5 of them in there. And yeah, there's some pretty powerful ones. I know that last one that published, that was the one where the lady was talking about the interacting with her doctor. And I try to kind of do a little bit of a live reading. So so I can get a little bit of that reaction. I was just like, wow, that's your doctor actually listened to you. That's amazing. It's a sign of a good doctor right there.
Well, I guess along this lines, I have a selfish question sort of for you. Our kid Sam has kind of eczema right now and candida. Do any herbal things pop into your head when you hear these words?
Well, I know I know I have a video that's on things for skin health, but it does sound like it could be, in my limited knowledge, that the eczema could be caused from the candida, which I'm assuming is in the gut. Um, there's there's a lot of different things. What do I have? I Seems like I have a video on gut health. But I know things like, with candida, things that like fermented foods, cutting back on the sugars, obviously, especially your processed sugars, that's going to help. Uh, Yogurt is one of those. Good natural live culture yogurt can be very helpful if you can get them to consume it. I mean, my grandbabies, they love yogurt, so that's an easy one.
And that already is helpful. I mean, that's a place to start.
Again, a lot of this can be about, it's just like that rash I had on my arm. It wasn't eczema. I had eczema as a kid. I know what that's like. I don't know what this was. I tried everything I could think of. I know that straight vitamin E oil on eczema can be helpful. Shea butter on its own. A lot of people have attested to my homemade skin cream. I've had people locally too buy some for their grandchild or child that you had eczema, and that was the one thing that helped them. And all it is, I mean, I have recipes on it. So you don't have to buy it. You can go look up my skin cream recipe, and it's just coconut oil, shea butter, and then I use a herb infused oil that I make myself. But even if you don't have time to worry about the herb infused oil, sometimes even just shea butter on its own, just coconut oil on its own. Um, these things have natural, like, antiviral, antibacterial properties anyway, and can be very soothing. And then, I also put beeswax in it to thicken it up too, since I put the infused oil in there. But yeah, I have a lot of people attest to that. Several people say it's really helped with their kid, their grandkid, or themselves with eczema. I'm like, really? Because that's not what I made it for. I made it use on my face as a skin cream, and I've been using it for many years. And yeah, but I use it for other things too. I use it for my hands, my feet, whatever. Whatever I need it for. My friend, she uses it, and she got a really bad blister from working in her garden, and she said that healed it right up. But like I said, you can look up my recipe. I got a recipe on there.
I we will do it. Would you like to add anything about herbal stuff or about the Torah or about anything like that to anyone out there?
I know there's a lot that I could say about any of that, but it really comes down to, on all the way across the board, no matter what it is that you want to learn about. I just want to say that I've already said it, but I'm going to say it because I think it's important. First of all, understand your own personal responsibility to learn, to not expect to be spoon fed everything. There's nothing wrong with it. I mean, obviously, I'm here to teach what I know, but I don't know it all. I'm always learning. So I want to pass on information. But while I'm doing that, I want people to understand you can do this. You can learn on your own. And don't throw out the NIH studies just because it's a government website. You're throwing the baby out with the bathwater when you do that, because there's really great information there. I mean, that's where I've got some great information from there that coincides with what I found on medical sites and natural websites. So when you understand this, that you can put all this information and you can learn and you can do the research, it's time consuming. Sometimes it's dry reading, but you can learn. And if we expect to be spoon fed everything, we may not find what it is we personally need for ourselves, be it for our health, be it, our physical health, our spiritual health. And again, the personal responsibility and taking the time to read God's word when it comes to our faith and wanting to have that closer relationship. All of these things have to go hand in hand, and it's really important. I just don't think I can stress those things enough. So yeah, that's kind of my goal. Learn how to teach yourself. I mean, it's like homeschooling. So I remember when my oldest son did kindergarten and in public school. And it was during that whole year I started thinking, I feel really led that maybe I should go ahead and homeschool, but you're scared. It's always a scary thing. Every single parent says, I'm not patient enough. I'm not smart enough. Yes, you are. You love your kid more than any teacher at school can. You are the parent or the grandparent. You can do it. And with the Father being your strength and your guide, you can do it. You are smart enough. You are capable enough. So I was scared. And when my youngest son my oldest son, when he learned how to read, once he learned how to read and he had that reading comprehension, which for him, for that one, it was easy. It was easy to teach him that. I taught him how to be self-taught. The younger one took a little more time because every child's different, just like everybody else is different. It took him longer to grasp reading. So we focused more on the things he could do, math and history and whatever else. And then when he was ready, he was much older. When he was finally physiologically ready to start reading, once he started reading, he learned quickly, and then he was self-taught. That's how you do it. And homeschooling doesn't have to be that hard once your child is self-taught.
Why do you think all of these things seem to go together and be countercultural? Taking the responsibility of any aspect of life maybe it's just because it's harder that it's always countercultural. Like doing homeschooling, it's not the norm. It's countercultural. But you're taking this larger level of responsibility for your kids' education. Same thing with, I guess, Torah too. I don't know. Same thing with the natural remedies. Same thing with homesteading. You're no longer just buying everything. You are growing it yourself. It seems like maybe this is just becoming apparent to me. All of this is somehow connected. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, my thoughts are that you're right. You're right. And follow the money. Follow the money. Right? It's as simple as that.
It's
right?
always going to be countercultural. You're right. It's always.
Yep. Because anything that's popular, what is it? Somebody said, was it Mark Twain or?
Yeah. The majority.
If the majority is doing it, you're following me. You're going the wrong way. You need to do opposite of what the majority is doing. And it is not like I learned that one overnight either, but yeah, it was more and more just, you start looking around and you're saying, why are we doing this? Why does nobody have a Bible in church anymore? You start paying attention, you start seeing these things. And yes, I really believe that everything, this is all a part of the design, is to get us away from the natural order of things all the way around. We were created to work 6 days a week. Physical work, 6 days a week. We were created to eat certain types of food, not genetically modified food, not some lab created food. We were created to eat a certain way. We were created to live a certain way. When we start going back to that, yes, it's definitely going to be countercultural, especially today, because it goes against the norm. Wearing things like this on our clothing, it goes against the norm. But it's what the Father asked us to do. And when we wear these, like, I understand some people don't feel like they should have them public because it makes them a spectacle. And I get that, and I respect that. So I'm not going to say anything against that. But on the other hand, when we are living the way God wants us to live and we're wearing these things, people are going to ask questions. That opens a door for us to share the love of the Father and why we do what we do. And that's countercultural. And yeah, it's like I said earlier, I think whenever we're like, okay, how can I be a better mom, be a better grandma, be a better seamstress or cook, or get in better shape? How did they do things a couple hundred years ago? How did they do things in the Bible? Better yet, what does the Torah say? What are the instructions God gave for us? Because there was a lot of stuff that in regards to health, if someone had some kind of weird something on their skin, they were kind of set aside for a while. We don't go out there and, hey, touch this thing. I mean, there was rules for a reason. And the cleanliness thing, it was all for a reason. There was a reason. And so that period of time, by the way, that before I really came to Torah, but I took a period of time and just backed away from all unclean foods. And honestly, pork is not a huge thing on my list. Yes, I like bacon, but beef bacon is my favorite anyway. So, but I kept thinking, well, even if this law is not meant for us today, even if all these people are right, there was a reason why God didn't want his people eating this stuff in the first place. Why is that? Then you start learning about pork. Ugh. And here's something. This is going to be a little gross, okay? But so I hope you don't mind if I share this. But so somebody told me, I heard somewhere. I mean, they didn't know this from experience. I better clarify that they had heard that pork or that human meat tastes like pork. Ew. So I shared that with my son. Now, my oldest son is the assistant chief on the fire department. He has helped put out many fires. He has come across burning bodies. I told him that. He goes, well, that makes sense because it smells like pork when it's burning. And I was just like, I'm done with pork. What about you? Anybody else?
Whoa.
I mean, seriously. Okay then. Yep. Okay. So, and then you learn.
I think that's a little known. I mean, only your son and other fire guys would know that.
Anyone that's ever come across a burning body could tell you that. And I was just kind of blown away. I didn't expect that because I'm like, well, I heard this. I mean, I don't know how true it is. Wow. Okay. And considering that there's so much similarities in the DNA, that's kind of interesting. And then you also learn about, how like shellfish, they're God created them for a reason, but not for food. He created them to clean our water. He created those nasty slugs I hate so much to be cleaners of the earth. I mean, I hate what they do to my garden, but I know they serve a purpose. And so all these things we're not supposed to eat still have a purpose. And just because they're there doesn't mean, that they were meant for our bodies. They were meant for a purpose. Even those nasty flies we hate, so they serve a purpose too. They get rid of dead bodies and waste. That's what they do. So, yeah.
Wow, man. Well, I have more questions for you, but I feel like I shouldn't keep you forever. What are you working on now that you want people to know about? Or is there anything, we'll definitely link to your channel, but where else should we link? And what do you want to tell anyone out there? I mean, that you're working on lately?
Right now, I'm actually, it's funny because I put it right here just in case. So I've always got some kind of project going, as does Patrick. There's always something. So I've collected so many people's old jeans over the years. Like when I have a video coming out soon where I finally do a tour of my little sewing room that Patrick added on into this big, huge room. It was a terrible mess. And I finally organized it. And I'm like, man, I have a lot of denim and I'm going to get back into making some denim quilts. Well, what I'm doing right now is I'm making a denim and flannel. It's not supposed to be for a quilt for covering yourself. I'm making this to go specifically on top of our freezer because I need a new cover for our freezer to help insulate it, especially when the power goes out. So we don't, especially in the middle of winter, because that's when we're most likely to get power outages and we can't depend on the solar power. So if I make this quilt, I've got a few more strips to do on it. So it's going to be kind of a long, narrow thing to go over our big chest freezer. And that way it's going to add a layer of insulation to help keep things cold in there for a long period of time. So that's one of my projects I have going on. So it's kind of, you can take old people's old jeans. In fact, there's some of Patrick's work jeans in here that are kind of, I don't know if you can tell, the grease stains. But you know what? It adds character. They were used. He wore them.
That's so cool.
Yeah. So that's one of my projects right now. That and just I've been making myself a lot of linen skirts because, my main thing is skirts. And then I wear my own form of like pantaloons or whatever you call them, the pants underneath for added layer of modesty and just staying warm when it's cold. And I'm finding because of this, I am loving linen so much. It's all I ever want to wear. I do wear a lot of 100% cotton, but linen is great. So yeah, one of my other projects is making myself like throwing out some of my older skirts, especially skirts that might have some like polyester blend fabrics in there. And I'm replacing it with linen. And let me tell you something, that's another one of those things that, with the linen pants, with the linen skirt and our linen sheets, I just feel better. I sleep better. I feel better. I'm 58 years old, so just bear with me. I have hot flashes. Okay. That's just the way it is. It's life. Linen is amazing. It's amazing. And, or if you're a hot sleeper, no matter who you are, it's great. Linen sheets, I highly recommend it. Yes, it is more expensive, but it's natural. There's a reason why God had the Levitical priests wearing all linen. It prevented them from sweating. And I highly recommend it. If you can get your hands on some linen and start making your own linen clothes. I have made a couple of just basic linen shirts too. Maybe one of these days I'll replace some of my flannels with linen, at least for summer. But I love my flannels. But yeah, it's great. I highly recommend it.
Wow, my gosh. I gotta wear more linen too. But well, Heidi, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us and tell us about your life. It's been a pleasure.
It was fun, Luke. I really appreciate you asking me to be on here. I had butterflies the whole hour before this, but I really felt it was important for me to have a chance, besides just on my own channel, to share my testimony and pray that people can be blessed by that. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I'm sure they will. Guys, if you haven't signed up for our Patreon, you should consider doing it. Why? Because you can meet with me and talk about the Torah and talk about your life. I meet with a ton of people digitally, and we just talk about life in the Torah. So if you're interested in that, check out our Patreon. It's patreon.com/thelifewithluke.